Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Friday, and that means Friday Reads, kind of check-in that some booktubers do on Friday of their current reading, what they've just finished recently, what they're currently working on, what they're going to be reading next or soon. I love those videos, so it seems right that I should make them from time to time. So I want to do a Friday Reads for today, take you through on the iPad a few books and talk about them just a bit. This is not the whole of what I've read in the last week, and it's not the whole of what I'm going to read in the next week, but it serves the purpose. It gets the job done. So the first thing was a reread. I recently got this. This is the electronic version. I got a big trade paperback of the complete novels of Nancy Mitford at the Brattle Bookshop, where I wondered about that whole process. I wondered about the whole process of getting a print and paper book just because I like its format, and then reading it in that format, and then keeping it, I guess, in that format, putting it on a shelf and keeping it in that format. I wondered about that process because lately, in the last 5 or 6 months, I have not been doing much of that. I have been mostly reading on an e-reader. And maneuvering this thing, diving right into the book that I got at the Brattle, not this, but the big paperback that I got at the Brattle, underscored a lot of that decision, a lot of that process. The book was ungainly to use. I did not start at the first. This is a collection of a few novels. I didn't start at the first novel in the book because that would be really awkward. If you started the first book in the whole thing, then you're dealing with a little sliver of pages at the front of a 1,000-page brick of paper, which means unless it's laying squarely on your lap, it's going to be very awkward. And I didn't read the last book in the series either for the same reason. It's not a series, but I didn't read the last book in this collection either for the same reason. Because I'd be way at the end of a book. I have experienced that many, many times with big, fat trade paperbacks. There are quite a few here in little book rooms that are behind me. The little book room is under a huge amount of reorganization, but you get what I mean. I've experienced a number of times how awkward that is. So that already constrained how I was going to approach this book to start with. But I thought, you got it. It was $1, but you got it. So you should use it. You should use this trade paperback. It's a nice, big trade paperback. I had it here on the bed in the little book room, and I was, futzing around one way or another. I might have been canoodling with the bean, or maybe I was moving things on a shelf and I wanted to move it just temporarily. I put it on the floor. And within 30 minutes, I had brushed against it, bumped against it, partially folded the cover, went, oh no, etc., etc. It's just the physical maintenance of the thing. There had to be a place for it. There had to be oh God, somebody's digging again. There had to be a physical accounting of it at every step of the way. So that experiment, that whole consideration is ongoing. But in the meantime, I read the novel The Blessing, which I haven't read in years. I read it when I had a little mass market paperback of it 80 million years ago, and I read The Blessing and loved it, absolutely loved it. I swear, every time I come back to Nancy Mitford's novels, I'm more and more impressed by how incredibly sharp they are. And the Blessing is also meant to be funny. I mean, she's a funny writer anyway. They're always funny, but The Blessing is a comedy. And it's helped. It certainly helped in being a comedy for me by the fact that it gets a lot of its laughs at the expense of the French. but even so, even if it hadn't done that, I would still have it was wonderful. The book was wonderful. Of course, that reading experience was wonderful. The dealing with this trade paperback, not so much. And it reminded me, of course, to immediately search for whether or not I had the complete novels of Nancy Mitford. I do. I'd forgotten it, but I do. There's a file. It has this same collection, the same order. It doesn't have this cool penguin cover from the UK, but it's the same thing. Anyway, this isn't meant to be a Friday Reads about that subject. I just wanted, it's on my mind because it was directly connected with this book. Then I read I read Nick Bunker's new book, In the Shadow of Fear, which is a micro-history. It's one of those snapshot photo booth histories of America in the year 1950. And it was very good. I've generally tended to like what this author has written. He wrote a book called Making Haste from Babylon about the religious pilgrimage out of England and to the New World. And he also wrote, more recently than that, he wrote a book about the young Benjamin Franklin. I reviewed the young Benjamin Franklin. I really enjoyed writing that review. I love writing about Franklin anyway. And that book's sort of cemented for me that I really like reading this author. And this book, of course, microhistories have an unbearable burden to shoulder because nothing ever happens just in one year. So if you decide to write a story of America in 1950 or the year of Lear or 1491 or anything like that, you have to spend half the book providing context. Otherwise, what would be the point? Otherwise, you couldn't do this. Which is why I think that microhistories are a little bit fraudulent as an endeavor anyway. They're a little bit lazy or pandering as an endeavor anyway. Because no matter what, no matter how unintimidating you try to make your subject, you still have to work in the whole world and everybody in it. And Nick Bunker does that. He does that in this book, and he underscores the nature of that undertaking by making, when he brings in the context, he puts it in italics. Every other section of this book is 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pages in italics. This sort of underscores orthographically, typographically, how much of any book like this is not what it's promised on the cover. But the book was terrific. Just terrifically readable. And full of huge personalities. Now, there was one personality in this book that I was going to care about more than any other to start with. Just obviously, I was going to care about Mr. Republican. I was going to care about Senator Robert Taft more than anybody else in this book. And he's a large part of this book. But even more than he is, there is Dean Acheson, who is all over this book. Probably more than any other character. So when I was finished with this, I had Acheson on the brain and reread his great book, Present at the Creation. That is the author on the cover there. And this is not like most American politicians or cabinet members or whatever who eventually write their book. They eventually go and write their book. And usually I read those things. But usually they are unbelievably awful. They are an exercise in tedium. And Acheson could not write like that. His writing style, actually Nick Bunker in his book refers a couple of times to how brilliant a writer he is, how wonderful his prose style is. That's absolutely true. Present at the Creation, I don't think is in print anymore. I'm pretty sure that even when it was in print, I'm pretty sure that all the rest of Acheson was not in print. So I was very glad to go back to this and just bathe in it. You don't have to agree with Acheson to love this book. And it felt like a natural springboard from the one to the other. Then I read, this is a series that's ongoing from, I forget the name. I don't have the file right in front of me. I just have a picture of the academic publisher. I think the series is called Medieval Lives. And this is Michelle Brown. This is Bede and the Theory of Everything. A bright cover, so it'll be a little bit harder, a little bit dodgier to see here. Whereas I know I can head you off at the pass. Whereas I know the print copy of this book would not be a question of negotiating the light. I know that. Yeah, I do. I would have to find a place for the print copy of the book, and if the minute I take my eye off it, the minute I take my hand off it, it snaps closed like a snapping turtle, and I have to figure out where was I, what was I doing, what. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of Bede, the Venerable Bede. I'm a huge fan of his writing. I love it all of it that we have. And I'm looking forward to this book. It's a little bit suspiciously short. I have a feeling that it's going to be not for me. I have a feeling that I will not be its target audience, but we will see. Then this next one, I am certainly not the target audience. I have read this type of book probably a dozen times at least. They don't convince. I don't know that they're meant to convince me. This is by Jack Kelly, and it's called God Save Benedict Arnold, the true story of America's most hated man. Now, this is not true. This has not been true in a while. Benedict Arnold's name has become synonymous with traitor. You have little kids say, "Oh, you Benedict Arnold." That means you're a traitor, because Benedict Arnold was a traitor. He's not America's most hated man, not by a long shot, but he was for a while there anyway, a cautionary tale. And so he automatically draws contrarian historians who want to say, well, he wasn't all that bad, or maybe we misunderstand his traitorous betrayal of the United States, or maybe we misunderstand his relationship with George Washington, or whatever. We don't. We don't misunderstand anything. No one is saying that Benedict Arnold was never brave under fire. No one is saying that Benedict Arnold never did any good service for the United States or the colonies. And no one should be saying that any of those positive things are marks in a ledger against what he actually did. What he actually did was horrible. I don't know. I sometimes think that a whole generation of historians was poisoned by the Brady Bunch. Because the Brady Bunch, there's a particular episode involving Benedict Arnold that... anyway, we will see. I don't hold out. I was going to say I don't hold out much hope. I actually don't hold out any hope at all. I think I know what this book is going to do. But I'll give it a chance. This next one is Adolfo Ovi's. This is The Boy Generals. This is part 2. We've already seen part 1 of his study of the so-called boy generals, the very young generals of the American Civil War. You, of course, have George Armstrong Custer there, who always gets the limelight in any picture, in any portrait here. But there were actually a number of generals in the Civil War on either side who were dashing young men. They were swashbucklers as much as anything else. The previous volume of The Boy Generals I really, really liked. It had its flaws, but I really, really liked it. And the number one flaw with that previous volume is the number one flaw that will beset any historical endeavor like this, which is, are you going to fall for their PR? These young men were all about PR. They were very little about the things they said they were about. They were very little about solid achievement or even patriotism. They were mostly about their own PR, their own renown. They were criticized for it at the time, and I think if you take a 30,000-foot look at what they did, or what generals like them ever do, it's almost always negative. It's not only is it not what it's billed to be, but it's almost always bad. Just generally bad for the larger cause of which they were a part. But I love the way this author does it, so I will report back on this one for the American Civil War. Then we have, this is an edition called Damned Agitator. It's a Michael Gold reader. I don't think Michael Gold is remembered anymore. He was a rabble-rouser. He was a causey person, very much a crusader for social causes, and a prolific writer, and a very, very good writer. So I don't think I've ever read an anthology. I've read him in anthologies. I don't think I've ever read him anywhere else, but I don't think I've ever read an anthology solely of his own work. So we shall see what the introduction here is, what the the bridging materials are. That will largely the writer himself, Gold himself, I know I already like. So the whole worth of this thing will be in how it's done, how he's served up to me, and I don't have any idea of that yet. Now this next one I know. To a Fare Thee Well. There's a copy in this room. I've read it a million times. I have recommended it a million times, but it is getting a snazzy new reprint. This is Andrew Holleran's seminal novel, Dancer from the Dance. This is a great period gay novel that it's a whole world, it's a whole experience, and also it's as good as radioactive elements in terms of dating when it was written, which is valuable. It's a valuable service for a novel to do. I love it. I The last time I reread this was a few years ago, and I thought that it diminished. I thought it was smaller than I remembered. When I first read this, like everybody else who reads it for the first time, especially decades ago, especially pre-AIDS, I thought, what an incredible revelation. What an absolutely amazing revelation. What a weird and almost unprecedented kind of novelistic achievement. And I know that that reaction was overblown. And the last time I reread this, it creaked. It showed a little bit of its corners and its cheating. And for a new reissue, I know I'm worried that that is going to happen again. I'll give it a try and see. Certainly the glorious parts of this don't diminish. I just obviously the way that this is set in the American go-go bar scene of a bygone era, and obviously in America, for the most part, being gay has changed. So there are going to be large aspects of this book that don't work anymore, or that actually not that don't work, but that don't reflect reality. We shall see. We shall see. I'm always up for a reread, especially if I get a snazzy new edition in the mail. That would be wonderful. Then we have, this is Dan Sainor and Saul Singer. This was written months and months ago. It was worked on for a long time. It was put through marketing and edits and development meetings and whatnot, and then it was brought to market in the American book market at literally the worst time imaginable. So those aren't things you can plan. This is not a sarcastic commentary on modern events. This was finished and in the works as a book a long time ago. It's just timing. That's all. This is their new book. Is called The Genius of Israel. And it's about, what the subtitle says, the surprising resilience of a divided nation in a turbulent world. A large part of this is going to be about the Palestinian territories. A large part of this is going to be Israel, what is it? Resilience and turbulent. A large part of that resilience is going to be in the face of Arab resistance to the existence of Israel, both inside the nation of Israel and in all the surrounding countries. It's a field mine now. Israel is, of course, in the news now rather prominently, and not for genius. For me, before that story, when I knew this was out there and coming down the pike, I thought the problem would for my reading of it, would not be current events. I thought it would be the Abraham Accords. I thought it would be the Trump administration. I do not want to read a book that glorifies the Trump administration, or especially Jared Kushner. I don't want to read that, and I don't know how much of that I'm going to encounter. I actually don't know if I'll read this at all. I know this is a Friday Reads, where we talk about what you have read, what you are reading, or what you will read, and not what you won't read. I think I do want to read this. One of the authors here I really like, but I might wait. I might not read it now. I'm not sure that I could give it. I'm not sure that anyone could give it a fair reading right now. So I might just wait on it. I had to put it on this list because it is technically on the horizon, no matter what I do about it. Then there's this next one. This next one I think we've already seen on this channel. I have read an advanced copy. I will read the finished copy when I get it. This is Tom Quinn's book, Gilded Youth, which has a Windsor cover, but it is really about young royals over time, not just Windsor young royals. A book on Windsor young royals would be really, really good. A new one for the 21st century would be really, really good. But only if it told the truth. Only if you're researching, in heavy air quotes, your book about Windsor youth by reading up back copies of Royalty magazine, well, then you're not doing any research. Those are press releases. That's not history. The Windsor young people, the young people of the Windsor family, have been a rogues gallery of massive screw-ups. My God, you think of Freddie Windsor, he's one of the nicest of the ones, and even most of his misdeeds have been brushed up for the press. This is different from that. It spreads itself too thin, I thought. It's engagingly done. I'm looking forward to sort of sitting down and concentrating on the finished copy. Maybe I just had a greater degree of impatience with this than I should have. Also, I know he's not a youth anymore, but it's a little difficult to approach this subject in light of Prince Harry. So again, modern stories interfering with the writing of this book. I thought it was pretty good, but depending on how much you read on the subject, if you are a royalty buff, as I am, if you read books about royalty, then you're probably going to find this a little thin, a little bit perfunctory. But I'll be reading the finished copy. We'll probably get the finished copy on this channel, and we'll see if maybe my appeal grows. then we have a Penguin classic. This is Shogun Akutagawa and other stories. I think I opened this off camera. Pretty sure that I did, or maybe I got an electronic copy. I haven't got the printed copy yet. Rashomon is the famous story here because of the movie. I think some of the other stories are even better. And the introduction here is amazing. This is just a wonderful volume for Penguin. I don't know that it will do much. I think that Akutagawa is kind of frozen in the Western imagination by that one story, and not by that one story on the printed page. So I don't know. It's not fair. It shouldn't be true. When we tend to revere Japanese short story writers, as we should, because they're some of the best short stories, Akutagawa's name tends not to come up. And if his name does come up, people immediately say the name of just one story. So it's a little bit unfair, but a terrific volume. Then we have something. I've read a lot of books on this subject. We'll see if this one does anything different. This is the historian James Holland, and he's writing about 1943. It's another micro history. He's writing about the fight to retake Italy from the fascists. This is the Savage Storm. I think this comes out in December. An enormous amount has been written on this campaign, and Holland doesn't have any access to anything new. Not that anything new would be such a minor footnote that you couldn't work it into a big narrative. He's a big, popular historian, so this is not a monograph in any way. So even if new tranches of intelligence cables or whatever were uncovered, he wouldn't be able to use it in this book, which means this thing is standing cheek by jowl with all the earlier studies of the invasion and battle up the Italian peninsula. And some of those were brilliant. And the one thing this author is really good. He's really enjoyable to read. But the one thing I've never known him to be is brilliant. So I will see. The last thing that I like my World War II books to be is the thing that, for that very reason, a lot of them are, which is a slog. I really don't want this to be a slog. But we'll give it a try. We'll give it a try and see. Then, what do we have next here? Oh, okay, this was, again, I'm just showing you the cover. I read the enormous, heavy, unwieldy hardcover of this. The book itself slipped out of the paper dust jacket, I think, a couple of times. So I just took the paper dust jacket off to read the naked hardcover. For the rest of the book, for like the second half of the book, I took the dust jacket off and read the naked hardcover, which is still heavy, still awkward and ungainly to read. When I propped it on my chest to read in bed, it was awkward to do. I needed two hands. I needed a hand to brace the thing and a hand to turn the pages. And a third hand if I wanted to stop and annotate something, which I did a couple of times, because that requires that you find a bookmark, put the bookmark in the book, close it, lay it down flat on your chest, reach over for a pencil, pull the pencil over, prop the book up, hold it open with one hand, and make an annotation with your other hand. But that's not going to be easy to do, because you've got to turn the book into landscape mode to make your annotation in the margins where there's the most room. Because if you do it in portrait mode, there's barely any room in the margin to make an annotation. And when I was done with that, of course, for duty's sake, I read it that way because I found it that way. I bought it that way for $1. And when I was done with it, you can probably guess the final note in this farce, right? Of course, I could not find the dust jacket. I had no idea where I had put it, where it had gone to. And that's this. It's Simon Heffer's book, Staring at God, which is about Britain during World War I. And I really enjoyed it. I really did. It, again, like the Holland book, it has nothing new in it at all. Nothing new in terms of revelatory handling of the historical facts. You're still drawing the dots the same way. And nothing really new in terms of insight. Heffer is a pretty good writer, but I was never at a loss for what he was going to do next in any chapter. If you're talking about food, I know what you're going to do. If you're talking about power rationing, I know what you're going to do. If you're talking about strained personal relationships, including romantic relationships, I know what you're going to do. I practically know the family anecdotes that you're going to give me. I guess those family anecdotes might, in part, be the problem here. It might be that in order to get the kinds... I'm not sitting here saying that I want brand new stuff for history, above all things. Of course I'm not, especially on the doorstep of Nonfiction November. There's a kind of newness that I do want, and maybe I'm just going to have to wait. I'm not going to have to wait long. Maybe I'm just going to have to wait for a whole cadre of historians for whom World War II and World War I are dead subjects. Completely dead subjects. So maybe I had a great-grandfather who fought in the conflict, or a great-grandmother who was inconvenienced by the home front rationing. But I never met that person. I never heard their stories. Their stories are no longer cherished nighttime tales in the family. It's just dead history to me. So I can go at it and inquire into it without any piety. I guess maybe that's what I'm getting at here. Holland to a lesser extent, Heffer very much so. These are pious books. I don't know. Maybe I should be careful what I wish for, because the one quality that I would not import to Nick Bunker is piety, and yet maybe to the extent that his books are a little bit on the bland side, maybe that's the reason why. So I might not know what I'm wanting here. This was good. It was good. It wasn't worth the struggle with a 5-pound block of paper and paste. It very much was not worth that. I don't know that any book would be, and that marks a sea change in my behavior towards books. Once upon a time, of course, you all know this, unless you're very, very young, unless you were born in the 21st century, then you all remember a time when you wouldn't have even thought of that. With a book like this, you wouldn't have even thought of those elements. Of course, it's difficult to maneuver. Of course, it's heavy in the hand. Of course, it's hard to annotate, and there's very little room unless you make your annotations in the blank pages in the back instead of right where you think about them. Of course, it's all those things. What else would it be? But now that I know what else, now that I know the alternative, anyway, I enjoyed this. And if you are interested in the subject, well, you might enjoy it too. Then we have a talking head on news shows. If you're in America, you will have seen this guy, Jonathan Karl. Like everybody else, like every other talking head, he wrote a Trump book. And I am reading these things. I'm reading these Trump books. Although right from the beginning, I have been calling them on what they are, and I still am. As far as I know, I'm the only critic who has been calling them on what they are before I even dig into their relative strengths and weaknesses. Little spoiler here, they don't have a whole lot of strengths, most of them. Most of them are Trump. When I call them Trump books, I mean that as the ultimate condemnation. I don't mean that as the subject. I mean that they are opportunistic and grifting, and mostly deceitful. And Jonathan Karl wrote a new book called Tired of Winning, about Donald Trump and the downfall of the traditional Republican Party. And there's the stereotypical picture of Donald Trump walking back to the White House looking drained and defeated. And the title refers to a quote that Trump made on the campaign trail that has been quoted endlessly, where he told his followers who were not yet Trump cult members. They are cult members now. It is a cult now. But then it was just a weird presidential campaign. He told them, we're gonna win so much, you're gonna get tired of winning. You're gonna ask me, please, sir, could you win a little less? We're all tired of winning. And Karl's point here is to ironically juxtapose that with the true nature of Trump in the last, say, 6 years. So in office and out of office, where it's been 91 criminal indictments, where it's been found liable of sexual assault, and also by a different judge actually declared a rapist in court. thousands and thousands of dollars in fines, civil judgments that are putting him out of business in the city of New York, and his children too, his widow babies, putting them out of business in New York as well, and more and more. I mean, in the course of this book, Carl he describes some of that avalanche of negative stuff. He doesn't describe anywhere near as much as there is out there, and as with all Trump books, that automatically makes me suspicious. Why are you avoiding Ivanka? Why are you avoiding Jared Kushner? Is it because they helped you? Is it because if they scratch your back, you scratch theirs? Is that it? I can think of a few other people, too, including a couple of major Trump donors who come off smelling like roses in this book. They are not roses. They are awful. You're supposed to be a journalist. You're largely silent on them. Is it because they helped you? That's why I call these things Trump books. It's not because of their subject. It's because of their methodology. And also the basic premise of this thing that, we're tired of winning. Well, showing a defeated Trump and implying or stating all throughout the book that, well, that promise didn't come to anything, did it? When the Speaker of the House was just elected, whose only job, his only priority, he's been fielding for the last day as the appalled American public learns his opinion on all kinds of things. All kinds of things, you name it. And the American public has not learned the whole of what's out there. He's pro-slavery, for Pete's sake. He doesn't believe that women are human. He doesn't think they should have any rights under the Constitution. And also, he's a young Earth creationist. So he doesn't believe in evolution, and therefore, where will he be for the next pandemic, for instance, which is entirely about evolution, or anything else? He doesn't believe. He thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old. I'm older than that. But the American public and the as usual asleep at the wheel American journalists have suddenly realized, oh wait, who is this guy? And found out all these horrifying things, and there are worse to come. And they've been trotting out all those horror shows while ignoring the only thing on his mind, the only priority he has, the only reason that he was elected after so many other candidates were floated and then dropped. He was elected because he had Trump's approval. And the reason he had Trump's approval is because he is not going to let anyone else be certified as president in 2024. Regardless of whether or not Trump has any kind of an electoral presence, and regardless of whether or not Trump is a free man. That's the only priority that he has. I would call that winning. In a dark way, but I would call that winning. That you're still controlling the government, one half of the government. I would call that winning. But I don't think anyone. I shouldn't say we'll see what you think, because I don't think anyone out there is reading these books except me. I really don't. Then we have. Oh, thank God. We'll get to history. This is a UK publication that I just went ahead and got because I have been loving this series. This is the latest book in a long series that Jonathan Sumption is doing on the 100 Years' War. This is Triumph and Illusion. Big, thick thing, not at all like Nick Bunker, not at all like the other books, to James Holland, for instance. This is not popular history. This is not aimed at a beginner. Someone who does not know about the 100 Years' War I would not advise you to read this series of books to start. It doesn't matter if you start with volume 1 and go on. This is unbelievably granular history. I have loved every volume, hence the rather hefty outlay of money for this new one. I'm not going to get this from an American publisher. I don't think this whole series, I don't think has ever been published in America. I love this series. I know I'm going to love this book. I just, it's on my Friday reads, but I automatically want to turn Friday reads into recommends or not recommends, just because it's in my blood to do that sort of thing. In this case, it's just me reporting on what I'm reading. I love the series. Okay. All right, we'll move from the 100 Years, the extremely scholarly, definitive, multi-volume history of the 100 Years' War, to something slightly less intellectually rigorous. This is K.L. Hears, the pen name K.L. Hears, and it's tentacle fiction. But not just any tentacle fiction, it's the kind of tentacle fiction that warms your heart and other parts of your anatomy because it's Christmas tentacle fiction. Or should I say, Squidmas. This is the 12 Days of Squidmas. in which I haven't read this yet. I haven't spent the 20 minutes to read this yet, but I gather there's a Scroogey type figure whose heart and maybe a couple of other orifices are opened wide by a very squiddish Christmas, where he's well, let's just say that Scrooge's famous line, "The spirits did it all in one night," takes on a whole new meaning. We shall see. We shall see. I have never yet been disappointed by tentacle fiction, and I don't imagine this will be the first one. And then we'll finish up with this book. I've shown it to you before. I read it, and I really enjoyed it. It's an odd book. It's odds and ends. It's by Bernard Cornwell with Susan Pollack, and I think the with Suzanne Pollack is a big inclusion in this case. I sense an active other hand in this book. This is UTs Feast, which is the sort of capstone volume on the stories of Uhtred, son of Uhtred, in Cornwell's historical fiction series. There are stories in here, short stories that aren't anywhere else in the series. So you get to enter that fictional world one more time. But there are other little bits and pieces here, including recipes, that are fascinating. I found them fascinating, even though I don't cook and would never think about implementing them. But if you have read the whole of this series, you've got to get this final volume. It is very much a kind of a capstone treatment of the whole thing, unless Cornwell goes back to that series or lets someone else write stories in that series. This will probably be it. So there you go. Sorry for the length of this video. That was a Friday Reads for today. All over the map here and full of questions too. Sorry about that. It's been that kind of a week, if that excuses me in any way. But I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.